Where are we at?
65. What's up, you guys? Hello, happy Monday. I got my sidekick counterpart, better half.
Yeah,
that's what it is.
She ditched me. Let me hang
He
out.
came home and he was like, we should go live. And I was like, I am going to bed. I already went live, but so.
Left me in trenches.
So if you miss Brandon, give him a we missed you, buddy, and we're glad you're back. Maybe I'll have you go live one day without me. We actually realized we don't like going live. Hi, Nate. We don't like going live alone because you have a pause in your thought and then the other one takes over.
I can't live without you.
You can't lie without me. So he's lying. He says we're lying. All right, guys, let's get to this. Live. Oh, live.
She's so pretty.
He does not mean that as a compliment. All right, guys, so today we're going to talk about accountability. So when we started this whole thing, it was the beginning of COVID, and now, there's a lot of other interesting things happening in the world.
A little bit extra spice and gasoline.
We're going to give you a little bit of our take on some of what you can do right now.
Thanks, Nate. I appreciate you, buddy.
Some of what you can do right now, and maybe just a little different perspective on the riots and everything that's been going on the last few weeks. So, want to start?
Sure.
Okay.
So obviously, you guys, this has been a whirlwind of different things that have come our way over the last 2.5 months now. Just different things that, unfortunately, this is an area we've obviously had to work through before in our history. I think it was 4 years ago we had to work through a similar scenario of these events that have happened, in the last couple of weeks. But I think we want to kind of just give a different perspective. I think there's you feel a lot of different sides clashing right now, a lot of different viewpoints, a lot of different things going on, a lot of different opinions that are happening, and I think, for all the things that we've been talking about this entire time frame since the beginning of when we got shut down to now, is everything corresponds together, right? Like the message doesn't change. It just, the context in which you can apply it to just shifts a little bit, right? Like everything for us and what we've been able to find starts yet again with awareness and curiosity, right? Of being able to take a step back and remove yourself from this scenario and really look at something from a 10,000 foot view. And I think what's going on right now is you're not yet again, like I think you're seeing the reaction of people because first and foremost, we've been in essentially house arrest for the last 2 months. And so that already was kind of sparking a lot of uncertainty and a lot of different emotions and all these kind of things. And we talked about people having their emotional home, when we are going through the different certain circumstances, and then all of a sudden you throw in a circumstance like this, and basically it was like pouring gasoline on top of an already stewing fire. And then yet again, how people react is usually their emotional home, and you're seeing a lot of different people react differently, right? Like you're seeing some people react in outbursts of sadness. They feel alone. They feel like the world's going to be against them. They're feeling all these things. And then you see the other side of the coin where you're seeing people react violently. You see people acting with a lot of rage, a lot of anger, and different ways they're going about doing those, despite whether or not that makes sense to you as a person, right? But that's really what's going on here, is where their emotional homes are, is where they're responding in these moments in time, right? And so what we want to kind of get you guys just get thinking about is more than anything, you guys, is for any sort of change. Yet again, if you go back, unfortunately, like obviously in the 60s, like this was another movement type of thing that was going on as far as, racial and all the other equality things that were going on, and a lot of change happened through theirs. But
you're on repeat every fourth word.
That's weird.
Is it skipping?
Skipping? I'm on a remix.
But we're gonna do what we can.
We're gonna see what we can do. I appreciate it, Zach. But I think more importantly, you guys, is from 1960 to now, that's really not a lot of time, right? Like that's really not a lot of time. And I think what also tends to happen, we talked about stories, right? Like we tend to pass stories from one generation to the next, right? Like I tend to hold on to stories from my parents. Their stories came from their grandparents, and so on and so forth, right? And so it's becoming aware again, and it's yet again when we're involving these things, and it's as you become more aware for yourself, you also can start to ask yourself the 3 questions of,
is this real? Is this true? And is this mine? Does
yes.
I get to take over?
So, not quite yet. So when you can dive into those kind of things, you guys, and really kind of take a step back and really look, in our opinion, right? Like yet again, there's a reason why this continually comes up, right? Like this continually comes up. There's an outrage, there's protest, there's riots, there's damage, there's violence, there's all these things that are happening, but they continue to happen, right? And so from my opinion is if you want something to change, you can't expect to go about it the same way as you've been doing it, right? Like that's the definition of insanity. So if every 4th year, 6 years, whatever this is, we are seeing this more and more, and it's not like this hasn't been going on. It's just the fact that we see it more and more because there's more cameras everywhere, right? It's because it allows us to see it in a lot of different ways that we probably have never been able to see it before, even though it's been in our eyesight forever, right? Like this is a 400-year-old problem that we're still dealing with today, right? But I think the point that we're gonna, and I'll let Courtney elaborate on this a little bit more, is all change, every aspect of change, whether you're talking about fitness, whether you're talking about nutrition, whether you're talking about beliefs, whether you're talking about making your bed, whatever it may be, has to start with you. And it has to start with me. Right? And I think that's the part that we've seen over and over and over and over again, whether it's on Facebook, whether it's on the news, whether it's on ESPN, is we all have these great ideas, right? And I'm just saying that, and we all have these great ideas, and by no means is this ever going to negate what happened, right? Like no way, no how should this have ever happened? Should we treat each other like this? Never in a million years, but it does happen, right? But what we tend to do is the same thing that happened 4 years ago is we need to start creating this. We need to look outside ourselves. We need to do these things when instead we need to start looking inside of ourselves and understand the change that needs to happen within us. And once I change internally and understand my belief system, understanding my modeling of the world, understanding where all these things come from, and understanding that I do have judgments, I do have prejudices, I do have things that I have said, done, and reacted that unknowingly could have very well irritated somebody else, gave them the wrong sense, gave them some sort of perception of me that had nothing to do with what my intention was, right? But because I have a blind spot because of the views that I have, I'm unaware of that. Right? And so in my opinion, I think what really holds us back from change is the fact that we can't have conversations. Everything has to be a debate. Everything has to be, I'm going to prove you wrong, and I'm going to bring up every Google source that I possibly have to show you are wrong, right? As opposed to understanding, I have my view system and I have my belief system based off of the experiences I have, based off the references I have, based off the education I have, based off of my family values that I was raised with, right? You have the same thing. But until we can look and appreciate and come from a place of non-judgment, the fact that you don't believe the exact same thing that I believe, and you don't see the same color, you don't see the same number, you don't see whatever the exact same way, things are never going to change. I'll leave.
So Bruno was really fired up on this on Friday, and he's like, I feel like I need to do something, I need to post something, I need to say something, and like, I try to like limit my exposure to things because I know what it does to my internal system. I'm not saying I'm trying to be naive and I don't want to know anything, but I know there's an amount of things that I can let into my world and that I choose not to, right? And so he was, and he's the same way, and it was kind of like this spiral and just seeing the stuff that people say and do, and I mean, it's all so much heightened with Facebook and all of the things, but I said, you know what? The thing we need to do is continue to teach people what we're teaching them, right? And so we were listening this morning, ESPN was on and they were interviewing somebody, and she was talking about what can you do, and it's like, hold your governor accountable, hold your mayor accountable, hold your best friend accountable, hold this person accountable, hold that person accountable. The thing she never said was hold yourself accountable, right? And that's the thing, you guys. The more you can look inward and you can go, okay, everything I see in my outside world is a projection of my internal trauma, my wounding, the things that have happened to me, the things that haven't happened to me, the things that I believe because of my stories and my beliefs and my values, right? You have got to look inside and go, okay, where do I need to shift? Where do I need to change? What do I need to do, right? Like if my gut reaction is like, I'm gonna go out and burn up a cop car because this cop acted completely unjustly, like what's going on with me? Because is that really a logical reaction? And I'm not saying anybody's responses are good, bad, otherwise, but you need to look at yourself and go, okay, what's going on with me? How was I raised? What was my scenario, right? Like, I mean, we realize we do it. Like we'll say things to each other as like a description of a person. that is not a race that we are. And I'm like, we caught ourselves doing it, and now we don't do it anymore because we caught ourselves doing it, and like it wasn't a negative thing, it was a description. But then I realized like I didn't say that white woman, and I was like, oh my gosh, why do I do that? And like I caught myself doing it at one point, and I was like, oh, that's terrible, right? I was like, I'm not prejudiced, but to some degree, like we were raised I was raised as a little blonde white girl. Like that's the only experience I have to go off of, right? And so when we started to realize that, I was like, okay, I get to shift my language around this. I get to bring awareness to the fact of what is actually going on inside of me and where did that come from and what were the stories. And I mean, I remember as a kid, my grandma saying racial slurs, not as slurs, that was just the way she was taught to speak. And we were like, Grandma, you can't say that. She didn't know any different, right? And so right now you need to look and you need to go inside and say, how can I keep myself accountable, right? Like I need to be accountable for my actions and my feelings and my trauma, right? And then it's my job to be the ripple effect, right? I need to teach that to my children, and I need to teach that to the people around me, and I need to bring awareness. And so like we said with everything, whether it's racism, whether it's changing who you are as a person, whether it's like whatever you're trying to shift, it always starts with you. It always starts with looking inward, pulling back the layers, understanding it. If we talked about judgment for an entire week. So if you're like, I don't know how to do that, go back, I think 3 weeks and watch. We had a whole week on judgment. But you have to, and when you look at these scenarios, you've got to look at a bigger view, right? Like, yes, all of the things that went down and most of the things that have happened in the last week and a half, like none of them are right? But like what's going on 5 levels deep in that person's life? What was going on in the person that was holding the video camera and didn't do anything? Like what was going on and like what state is the world in? And you have to be able to take a step back and try to see bigger sides of it, right? Again, doesn't make it right or wrong. It doesn't make it right? It makes it still wrong. But like when you can gather some understanding in scenarios like this, it makes it a lot easier in other scenarios. Like we talk about this all the time. People have conflicts at work. And I'm like, well, it's probably not your boss being a jerk, just being a jerk to be a jerk, right? Like what's going on at home with your boss and with his family and with his wife and what's going on at her work, right? Like there's 10 levels deep of why we're all reacting, right? And like Brayden said in the beginning, right now, we've all been like, you got to stay home. You got to do the things. You can't leave. Like we all have a sense of like our freedom has been taken from us. At least I think we do. And then something like this happens and it's like, okay, that was the thing. Now I'm done. I'm out of my house. I'm going to go, I'm going to, like, I don't trust the government or I don't trust this or I don't trust that, right? Like, so you take a step back and breathe, right? And look from the observer at your own life and where are your prejudices? Like, what are you projecting that you don't realize, right? And be honest with it.
Where's your prejudice for yourself?
Right, exactly, right? And it doesn't have to be like racism, but like where are your prejudices in the world for like how the world is supposed to work or how the world does work or any of that stuff. Like there's a book called The Dark Side of the Light Chasers, right? And so like in a very woo-woo sense, right? We talk about like we do a lot with food and body and that kind of thing, but like when you really get to it, like we are all souls in human bodies. I'm gonna go there with you guys right now, so hang with me, right? Like we're all souls in human bodies, and so really all this body is like it's a meat sack to hold your soul, right? And so does it matter if that meat sack is fat, skinny, black, white, Hispanic, whatever? Like it doesn't matter. And so what we need to understand is that we are one, right? And that takes separating from self, right? Spending some time, do some meditations, get beyond the fact that like this is a 3D world and there's a whole lot more stuff going on with us, right? And when we can start to understand that we are part of the oneness, it's going to take away that separation. But again, it all starts with you and understanding you, right? Nobody else, you can't keep anybody else accountable. No one can keep you accountable. The only person that can keep you accountable and the only person you should be accountable to is yourself and what's going on with your healing, your trauma, your learning, your growing, your being the positive light in the world versus the polarizing piece of the world.
Well, and I think I heard kind of a cool thing today that, is talking about basically we are really not that different. I mean, us as human beings, we really are not that different. I think it was 99.5% of our DNA is the same, right? It's that last 0.5 DNA that separates and makes us different as human beings, right? And so I think, and they were talking about, and I think it's a podcast I listened to months ago. It's from, I think, the pastor Miles McPherson, I believe his name is, but he was being interviewed. I think I'll repost it just because I think it's a great just viewpoint of talking about a lot of these things, of understanding that, when you, yet again, we grew up in sports, right? Like we grew up in sports, and I grew up in Arvada, right? Like I grew up in Arvada, like very middle class, white collar. Like I think we had, maybe a handful of, African Americans and other stuff. It wasn't a big melting pot that I grew up in. So there's a lot of things that I didn't get to experience in high school, but then I got to experience when I got to college, because when I got to college, on that team, there was a much more broader mix of cultures in that, right? We had guys from California, we had guys from Hawaii, we had guys from that were Samoan, we had Asian culture, we had Black, we had a whole different aspect that I got to be around and experience. And at the same time, understanding when you're on a team, it doesn't matter, right? Like you're brought together for a cause, right? Like your cause is to win and beat the team across you. It doesn't care if it's black, white, purple, yellow, or indifferent, right? Like your mission is to beat the enemy that's wearing a different colored jersey, right? Like, but you come together in that sense, and it doesn't matter in those regards, But I think when it comes to this circumstance, you guys, is really understanding, and a lot of it was talking about is celebrating our commonalities as opposed to seeing all the differences between us, right? Now, and it's human nature, right? Like we don't like things we don't know. That's how our brain is that's how our brain keeps us safe, right? Like it's rooted in fear. We talked about this before over and over and over, right? But what we see on there is we see things that are different, and we don't like that, right? And so it's being able to yet again acknowledge that, come from a place of awareness, right? Like we were just talking about that on a sense of like when we go to a fitness convention, right? Like what we tend to do is we seek out people that are in kind of our same realm of the industry, right? Like we seek out CrossFit coaches, we seek out functional fitness people, we seek out strength and conditioning coaches. Like, yeah, there may be Zumba people, there may be, Tai Chi or whatever else might be out there, but typically we tend to gravitate towards those things. Now, if we put that in a
But we do it not because we're better because we're CrossFit.
It's from a subconscious, unconscious level.
We have similar experiences with those people, so we have more to talk about. We have it's
relatability.
Exactly, it's relatability, not like we're better because we're CrossFit gym owners. It's like no, but we have similar things that go on in our industry, and we probably face similar problems in our business, right? It's the similarities, not the fact of there's a you guys do that and we do this, yes, right? It's nothing to do with that.
Yes, it is just the fact that we tend to gravitate towards what we know,
right?
And so the same thing goes if that was looked at on a Rachel platform, right? Like, what was it?
You said Rachel.
Racial platform, right? Like that could be deemed as a perception of look at that. They tend to stick with their own kind. But yet again, that's me being unaware of this scenario of how I can react, right? And I think that's the biggest part that's most important in all of this and how we start to create change, right? Because that's the other thing I've seen is get out there and vote, get out and do these things. Yet again, the only thing that I can change is within myself, right? And yes, is it important to find the people that align with the viewpoints and what you think is going to allow change in things? Absolutely. But most importantly, it has to start with you. And I think really from a grand scheme for all of us, it has to be, we got to shift and be aware and understand that I too, probably, even to my friends of a different race to myself, I too probably do things that might irritate them at times, right? I too may do some things that unknowingly to myself may cause them to question, what the hell are you thinking, right? You don't do that. But unknowingly to me, I may do things that may cause those things. But until I'm open to saying, hey, you know what? What are the things that I do that may give you the wrong interpretation, that may give you the wrong perception of my viewpoints or what my thought process is, right? And until we can open the doors for that, and not just racially, but I'm talking about politics, right? Religion, right?
Talk about those things.
But that's the whole point of why we fall into this trap over and over and over again is we don't have to agree upon everything, but we can learn to appreciate and there's the other two words, but that we can learn to appreciate and understand that you have your viewpoint, I have my viewpoint, and we can come to a common understanding that that's great. I appreciate you for that. And I can still, you can add to my plate of understanding and I can add to yours as we go forth. But this whole constant battle of who the hell has to be right all the time is just causing us further separation, right? Like, it's been amazing to have the tools and the technology we have to still stay in connection with people during quarantine. But if you look at it, it's also been a device to cause more separation between us, right? Like, we have more tools to connect and more ways to get more education. We have more ways to find references for different things. But it has also caused us more ways to create debate, more ways to put somebody else down, more ways to make somebody else feel like their viewpoint isn't valid in any new way, right? And I really feel like for us to create some sort of change is we have to create openness within ourselves and understand that it's the same thing we talked about when it came to mindset, right? Like, you have to be stronger than your thoughts and your feelings. No. Because if that's my mentality and I have to be stronger and I'm negating my own thoughts, my feelings, and I have no compassion for myself, I have no understanding for myself, what's the likelihood that I'm going to have compassion for her? What's the likelihood that I'm going to have understanding for somebody else that's coming from a different viewpoint? Probably none. If I can't do that for myself, I'm certainly not going to do that for another human being.
Yeah, and it goes back to be that change you want to see in the world, right? Like, if you think something in the world needs to change, you need to change, right? That's the only way that it happens. You cannot influence other people. You can try as much as you like, but you can't influence other people. And I think the other thing to think about is, we talked about this last week about something else, but like, be on the debate team, right? Like, go back to high school debate and be like, okay, I'm going to find all the things on this side of the line and all the things on this side of the line. There's always two sides of every story. Like, life is dancing in the gray. Where's the gray? Where can we understand that? How can we bring awareness? How can we see within ourselves both sides of the story, right? Like, how can you be both sides of all stories, right? And if you can do that, you're going to start to see more grace, more love, more connection, more honor, and a lot of people that are probably hurting, right? A lot of people that are hurting, that need healing, that need help, that need somebody to reach out and say, hey, I give a shit about you, right? Like, that's where all of this comes from. All we all want is love and connection and safety. And so, like, where can you see that? How can you be that for somebody? Like, what can you do right now to help somebody feel that way? And it starts with doing with yourself. Like, where do you need to love yourself more? Where do you need to heal more? Where do you need to have more growth? Because as soon as you do that, that ripple is going to start to happen, and you're going to be able to do it in the world. And that's really where change comes from. It all has to start within ourselves. So if you're looking for a good book, like I said, that The Dark Side of the Light Chasers is really, really good. It's confronting, and it will make you go, oh gosh, that's really what's going on. But it's pretty amazing. So good.
I think so.
All right, guys. Hopefully it wasn't too glitchy. If it was, maybe the replay's better. But thanks for jumping on, you guys. We appreciate you guys. We love you guys. And we'll see you tomorrow.
Bye now.